Okay. Good morning. My name is Tim Barrow, and I'm here today on behalf of NYPAN, the New York Progressive Action Network, whose many chapters around the state support this issue, support stopping climate change, and support freeing Danziger. 10 years ago, the unthinkable happened. Steve Danziger won a massive lawsuit against one of the largest corporations on the planet on behalf of the people of Ecuador that the actions of that company had harmed. Today, we're here to witness a different kind of unthinkable, which is that Danziger has spent over 500 days in house arrest at the whim of a judge that I can only call corrupt, and it ain't right. This is all about a company using all of its power and resources to prevent its profits from being reduced even a tiny bit to help the people whose its actions harm. If Chevron gets away with this, it will open the door to legal action by corporations against all progressives. And we cannot let that happen. As others have said, if fossil fuel companies are forced to pay the true costs of their production, including environmental costs, that will be a powerful stimulus to other fuel sources. So our job is to force them to pay by being visible, by being loud, and by working to free Danziger. Free Danziger! Free Danziger! Free Danziger!
Free Danziger! Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Our next speaker is Fatima from the Union of Arab Women.
Yay, Fatima.
Hello everyone. Today we are here for two things. To remind the Chevron company that they should have an obligation to protect our planet. We won't let them destroy lives and our planet. The second reason is to stand up with Stephen Danziger, who dared to stand up for indigenous Ecuadorians and hold Chevron accountable. We demand to free Danziger.
Free Danziger!
Free
Danziger! Fatma.
Thank you.
That was very loud and the message.
Loud and clear.
كوثر خلص خلي أختها ظل أختها الآن.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're gonna start us with the chant again. What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
When do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Our next speaker will be Suzanne, the sister, and she will be reading a statement from the former president of the ACLU.
So thank you. It's me again. This is on behalf of Nadine Strawson, who was the first woman president of the ACLU. She now teaches at New York Law School. And perhaps most importantly, she's part of the Danziger commission that is actually looking into today and the case and everything else. I mean, when have we had something like this in the United States of America? Usually it's right. Usually it's in Russia, Turkey, whatever, but we have to actually have a commission of prominent lawyers keeping the judges in check. Hold on. Is this typical? Okay. So she says, Nadine, this case is vitally important for our justice system and how it is perceived by the rest of the world. Stephen Danziger is a dedicated, effective human rights lawyer who for years has courageously stood up for indigenous peoples and farmer communities in Ecuador, victimized by Chevron's pollution. He is now being mistreated in unprecedented ways by the judicial authorities in the United States as apparent retaliation for his successful lawyering, which resulted in a $9.5 billion judgment for his clients that has been validated by multiple appellate courts in Canada and Ecuador. Although Stephen only faces petty charges of misdemeanor contempt, charges that the United States Attorney declined to prosecute, he has been locked up in his home for an astonishing 19 months without trial by a U.S. federal judge. This is as procedurally improper as it is substantively unjust. Stephen is the only person in the entire United States held pre-trial on a misdemeanor charge. The maximum sentence he would face if he were tried and convicted is 6 months, yet he has been held more than 3 times as long, for 19 months without any trial, let alone a conviction. I hope that the federal appellate court will rectify this grave injustice by ordering Stephen's immediate release and taking steps to cure the conflicts of interest in a prosecution that is essentially being controlled by a Chevron law firm. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rachel from the Sunrise Movement.
She has a speech.
Is Rachel here? We'll do chants for.
Oh, no. Rachel is going to be given a few words
Yeah.
on behalf of Sunrise Movement. Rachel Brody, she's on the phone.
Yeah,
Give
that's
us
fine.
Emily's
Yeah.
speech. Okay,
That's
have
fine. We're gonna do chant. Hi, Rachel.
Sorry.
Hi. So I am actually here speaking on behalf of the Sunrise Movement NYC Hub. They have been amazing allies to Stephen in this case. I know they've tried to take his case to Congress, tried to make people take notice of that. We appreciate all of their help so much. They're doing an incredible amount. They're activating so many young people. Anyone who's in New York knows what an effect they have on New York politics. And hopefully they're helping shine a light, will help this bring in new people to help Stephen's case and help make justice be served. So thank you, Sunrise.
We have amazing sponsors for this today's rally, so we'd like to give a shout out to all our sponsors. But for now, our next speaker is running a bit late, so we're gonna
He's right there. He's
There he is. Yeah, so Siraj Patel, everyone.
Fabulous. Hello.
Hey, Suraj.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. There's a mask. How's it going?
A free Zonda mask. Hold on.
Oh, we have masks?
Yeah, we got one for you.
Actually, let me just, if I'm speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep it. Thanks, guys. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Well, first off, everyone, thank you so much for being here for this all-important case. I have a lot of history with this case. Back in 2009, I went to Ecuador. I published about this at length. And so I think there are 3 fundamental issues here that we need to remember when we think about this case. This is a case about environmental justice, it is about human rights, and it's about civil liberties. Now, we know what happened in Ecuador from the 70s and 80s. We know that more oil was spilled in the Amazon than the Exxon Valdez did in Alaska. And that was the greatest environmental disaster in tort case ever. And the government of Ecuador in the 70s and 80s, and Texaco, later Chevron, were complicit in completely substandard environmental practices. 9 million gallons of oil were spilled in unlined pits. You wouldn't do that in America. You wouldn't do that in most countries. But they got to do it with impunity in Ecuador. Now, when I say this is the case about human rights, I want to tell you one other part that is underreported here. You see, this is Ecuador's Standing Rock. The area in which this oil was spilled was only inhabited by indigenous people who had no rights in the Ecuadorian government in the 70s and 80s. So when the Ecuadorian government was part and complicit in this joint venture, it's because the only people harmed were indigenous people. Time and again, indigenous people do not have the rights and the representation by their government. And so when Steve went to Ecuador and tried to get justice for these folks, he banded them together in the class, and Chevron said, you know what, we don't want this case in the United States of America, we want it in Ecuador. And in the 90s, they wrote 10 affidavits saying the Ecuadorian government's courts were fine. And then when they got a bad judgment, they reneged on every one of those things. Now, unless we have international standards, minimum standards for how we do mineral extraction across the world, then the only way to hold these folks accountable, big corporations accountable for their torts out abroad, is by holding them to a minimum standard here in their home jurisdiction. I'd be much happier to trade this away for the opportunity to have international minimum standards. But because we don't, in the absence of that, we need to create a deterrent. We need to create a penalty when somebody acts and does a wrongdoing to indigenous people and to the environment across the world. That's what this case is about. Now, we know that there are a lot of questions about the conduct of Chevron and even Steve. But this is America. And you are innocent until proven guilty in this country. You are entitled to a jury trial. Now, Steve is in house arrest now for an unprecedented 19 months for a misdemeanor charge that carries a maximum penalty of 5 months. Now, I don't know what happened with the case, and there are facts at question. But Steve's entitled to his day in court. He's entitled to a trial by jury, and a prosecution by prosecutor is not a judge. And then we should see those facts come to light. And my last point is then, this is a major problem in America and the world that's bigger than just this case. It's about institutional corruption. It is about the idea that big corporations with unlimited resources and the ultra rich and powerful can buy a set of rules for themselves, can buy legislation for themselves, can buy silence from Congress people who take corporate money from these very same corporations for their re-elections. That's what this is about. It's about undoing that injustice. And so I'm glad you're out here, and I think that we all owe Steve his day in court. And we owe these indigenous people and the environment the justice it deserves. So thanks so much for being out here today. Let's keep an eye on this case, keep everyone's eyes on this case for the next few months, and hope the justice is done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chapter, Amazon Watch, Sunrise Movement, and New York Progressive Action Network, and of course the people behind the scenes who did tirelessly work trying to make this a reality, to try to make this a success. So shout out to Sumaya, Rachel, and all the other people. If I go on one by one, we're going to be here for a long time. So just remember, guys, this is not over, and we will continue to fight for environmental justice, for a just political process, for the people, for equities, against anti-imperialism. So we're all here, and we're all we have each other. And I just wanted to say thank you all for being here, and ending it with one last chant. What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it? Now! Thank you all, everyone, and have a good day.
Can you say the sponsors?